The themes of romances are generally narrative. In the Sephardic repertoire, predilection is given to fictionalized and poetic narratives from the lives of either historical or fictional, generally highborn, characters such as kings and queens, captive princesses, and traveling knights, beautiful ladies, and their servants and slaves. This is from a young researcher, Caterina Garcia. You have a picture here of a couple, okay, and the man is sitting down and drinking coffee. Now, one of the main researchers of Judeo-Spanish literature and poetry and music, actually, was Samuel Armistead. So he wrote a whole series from the University of California Press, and he wrote in the book that I show the cover, The Folk Literature of the Sephardic Jews. It's based on what are called the chapbooks of a Sephardic Judeo-Spanish musical minstrel called Yaakov Abraham Yonah. Yonah, so he would sing the songs, he would write the lyrics in little pamphlets and then peddle them at his performances in, let's say, coffee houses in Salonika. Now, so Armistead analyzed in several books many of Yonah's songs, ballads, romances, and later on in New York, a Jewish Sephardic Hispanist, Meir Benedette, he wrote Judeo-Spanish ballads from New York. Although not all were collected in New York, but they were based on a lot of the interviews of Sephardic Jews, primarily in Europe, who gave examples of the various ballads. So here's I gave you one example of a ballad. And here's some analysis, but it's in English, so you'll understand most of this. La Sierpe del Rio, the river snake. This ballad was cultivated and told in Salonika. Uncle and nephew go wandering through the fields. They approach a palace or a castle. They are drinking wine and wagering as to which of them will kill or subdue the river snake, or the old woman of the river. One of them will use a sword, the other an iron knife. Further along the way, in Antequera, there is a mill that will not turn with water or wine, but which turns with the blood of little children, little orphans, little children. This is the opposite. This is probably a paganistic custom that the Jews are repeating. Okay, I don't know of any blood libel that was instigated because of this, or the Jews were never blamed for this. But it's interesting. It's a double take on a blood libel narrative. The Ballad of La Sierpe del Rio ends our collection in an enigmatic note. With the text currently at hand, the story remains essentially impenetrable. The uncle, the nephew pair recall heroic figures of the Carolingian romances, yet they can hardly be considered heroic, since they are all in their cups and are intemperately wagering on each other's bravery. The river snake, or the old woman, or perhaps some connection with Greek folklore and folk song, where fluvial spirits, stichia, frequently occur. It is unclear, considering the monstrous mill that grinds with children's blood, which are merely van der Stopfen, or actually form some part or have a connection with the serpent or the female ogre of the river. Now, sometimes they appear before, and sometimes after the references to the uncle and the nephew and the snake, or to an old woman. Elsewhere, they're connected to another song. So, in short, there are various versions of the story, and it doesn't only deal with the uncle and the nephew. It deals, maybe there's a woman or a demonized woman, some magical figure and all this is like producing the evil eye. So because of all these activities and the fear of the snake, the mill isn't going to work. Okay, and so you won't be able to have water, you won't be able to produce bread, you won't be able to make wine, and all these are Sephardic folktales. So my colleague, Susanna Shoshana Weich-Shachak, she talks about the second form of Spanish Jewish ballads, the romancero or the coplas. The actual performance of some romances, as in the Salonican example presented here, observe a concatenation. The last two hemstitches, sung in the second half of the musical stanza, the last two phrases, are repeated at the beginning of the two musical stanza, with the melody corresponding to the two musical phrases. So here, I give in Spanish, Judeo-Spanish, an example of the cancionero of a woman from Tel Aviv, from Salonika, named Renee Beavis, and she talks about the husband's return. Actually, it's a sort of like a euphemism. It's actually, in Judeo-Spanish, it means more like washing the white maiden. Okay, so you can read the text for yourself. I won't read it for you. Cantigas, the cancionero. The second type of Sephardic song is termed the cancionero, and is composed of cantigas, songs that are well known in the Balkan Ottoman empire areas and contests in North Africa. These are mostly lyrical songs with a strophic A-B structure, with only the second and fourth lines rhyming, and a refrain following each stanza, frequently sung to a different melody than the stanzas. Cantigas are typical for their textual variation and versatility, and they are often strongly influenced by the musical traditions of the environment. Some Sephardic cantigas are even known to be translations or parodies of Turkish songs. Cantigas present no textual continuity. They are rather brief lyrical compositions, and although textual similarities have been identified in cantigas and certain medieval and later Spanish compositions, cancionero repertoire is chronologically newer than the romancero and is believed to emerge exclusively after the expulsion of the Jews from Spain. Like the romancero, the cancionero is also a repertoire sung primarily by women, but conveying a different social function. While romances are songs mostly destined to the private domestic sphere, cantigas are songs of celebration. Most of them are thematically linked to wedding celebrations and courtship rituals. As such, they are performed by collectives of women, often sung in unison to a musical accompaniment which consisted mainly of a frame drum or pandur, or the tambourine, and occasionally of other predominantly string instruments, which were usually played by men. Now, the last form which we're going to talk about are coplas. These are strophic compositions, but in contrast with the cantigas, they are narrative episodes with historical, political, or paraliturgical themes, such as the so-called recreational songs. They are generally musically indebted to the traditions of the areas that the Jews inhabited. Coplas, a very vital genre within Sephardic music, experienced exceptional popularity in the 17th and 18th centuries. In the 19th century, they were composed by known authors and subsequently printed in songbooks, which contributed to their popularity, especially in the Sephardic centers of Salonika and Istanbul. The vitality of the genre is documented by the fact that there have been coplas composed up to modern time. Coplas are predominantly a male genre, as they are at least partly associated with writing and printing, unlike the romances and cantigas, which are exclusively orally transmitted by women. They are performed to instrumental accompaniment as part of religious festivals, like coplas de Purim or Hanukkah, and both family celebrations and social occasions. There is also a small body of coplas celebrating the life cycle, such as the coplas de parida, songs of the mother-to-be, sung on the occasion of childbirth. But mostly this is a social, recreational, and religious paraliturgical genre. The instruments traditionally employed in the accompaniment of the coplas are usually local, mainly belonging to the string family, such as the oud and the violin.